Welcome, I'm Sarah Daniels. This is History 705. This week, we're going to look more closely at why the preservation of old buildings is important to the study of and research of local history. For a moment, consider Egypt. Now, for those of us living in the United States, Egypt is not what we would consider local history. However, for those living in Egypt, the preservation of old buildings is. Think of just how many old buildings have been lost to time and history because they were not properly preserved. There is so much of Egyptian culture and history that was lost, partly due to the fact that old buildings and structures were not properly preserved. This is due to pharaoh after pharaoh trying to erase the pharaohs who had come before them. To bring things home, we're going to come back to the US and take a look at a building near where I live that has been preserved, restored, and marked as a historic landmark, the Carnegie Library. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to interview the head librarian and archivist at the Carnegie Library in Bryan, Texas. In addition to asking questions about the history of the library, we got to discuss how the library had been restored and preserved, not renovated. As you can see from the picture here on the screen, the Carnegie Library in Bryan is a large two-story red brick building with Greek-style columns. The building stands out because of its height, the year it was built, which was 1902, and because unlike the other historic buildings, it has not been altered from its original look. The surrounding buildings along Main Street that were built around the 1920s, however, have been renovated. They were given a 1930s, 1940s Art Deco look. When discussing the building, structure, and location, the head librarian noted that when it was decided that the city would spend the money to preserve the building and not demolish it, the historical community surrounding the museum or library pushed heavily for the building not to be renovated like the other buildings on Main Street or changed in any way, but restored and preserved to look just as it had when it was first built in 1902. So, what is the importance of preserving old buildings? According to Julia Roshi, there are 6 reasons to preserve old buildings like the Carnegie Library. The first reason she gives is that old buildings have intrinsic value. Buildings of a certain era, namely pre-World War II, tend to be built with higher quality materials, such as rare woods, like heart pine, and wood from old growth forests that no longer exist. This is something that the head librarian at the Carnegie Library pointed out during the interview as we discussed the renovation of the building. She said when they began looking at the building itself, they found that with the exception of some surface wear and tear, the building was solid and structurally sound, with most of, if not all, of its original hardwood features fully intact. This includes not only the grand staircases and the crown molding, but the structural hardwood of the building itself. The second reason that Roshi gives is that when you tear down an old building, you never know what's being destroyed. This is the case for buildings all over the world. Remember, when we talked about Egypt and the lack of building preservation, those pharaohs who were erasing any trace of a previous pharaoh were not only getting rid of the memory of that past pharaoh, they were erasing part of their own history, causing later generations to lose touch with their cultural past. The third reason Roshi brings up is that new businesses prefer old buildings. If the building is structurally sound with no foundational issues, it can be much cheaper to renovate or restore an old building than to build a new one. Fourth, old buildings attract people. There is something about old buildings that is welcoming and inviting. When I first walked into the Carnegie Library, the smell of old books made me want to take a seat and stay for a while. The fifth reason is that old buildings are reminders of a city's culture and complexity. They are witnesses to the past and can often hold clues to the city's culture and people throughout the city's history. Lastly, number 6, regret. Regret goes only one way: forward. The preservation of historic buildings is a one-way street. There is no chance to renovate or save a historic site once it's gone. Once you knock down those walls and remove the foundation, that building is gone forever. The culture and the people it witnessed, forgotten. Just like in ancient Egypt, when the pharaohs tried to erase those who had come before them, they ended up erasing vital parts of their history and robbing future Egyptians of the blessing and the treasure of knowledge of the past, who their ancestors were, where they came from, and what makes them Egyptian. That's why local history is so important. If we erase the past, if we forget the little bits like a small town in Texas, we might just be erasing a vital and key component of Texas's history, of U.S. history, of world history. Thank you for watching this lecture on why the preservation of historic buildings is so important. Below on the screen, you will see the bibliography or the resources used in compiling this lecture. Please feel free to visit the National Trust for Historic Preservation site and look up Julia Roschi's article titled 6 Practical Reasons to Save Old Buildings. And I encourage you, if you're in the Bryan-College Station area, to look up the Carnegie Library or the Carnegie History Center.